Today is a red letter day. It is hard to believe, but today is day number 300. And because of that, we have big things happening today, including a very special guest, CW Mundy. Hey, CW.
Hey, man.
How are you?
Yeah, thumbs up, baby.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, I can't imagine anybody not knowing, but CW is a world famous artist, a legend in his own mind. Let me show you some of his work. I'm just going to go through. You want to talk about any of this work while I show it, or can you even see it?
Oh, I can see it. Not really. You can just flip them through.
All right. Somebody told me one time that your work reminds them of looking at life through a glass with water on it. That one reminds me of that. That's a compliment.
Thank you. That's not the first time I've heard that.
I know. I'm
and
sure
it won't be the last.
Maybe not the last today.
Yeah.
What is this obsession with sailboats?
I love. I just love the sea life. I love the working man's harbor. I spent a lot of time in my art career there. I'm in love. You know, we've eaten in restaurants in Spain, right? I'm painting the fishermen on the boats, and then I go have a fresh fish lunch. Now, how great is that?
Yeah, really. All right. Well, we're going to get to know CW today. So what we're going to do, we're going to break format a little bit today. There is so much inside that brain of his that we're going to chat. CW is going to talk a lot about a lot of different things. What are you going to do? What's on the agenda for today?
Well, I think one of the most exciting things for me, and it's been an epiphany over the years, and I've really started to understand it. I was being taught that by studying art history, and then my mentors here that you know many of them, which I'll mention, but it's the key word here is relational. And this is the stuff that I think is going to be a big epiphany to the artists, the ones that are coming along now, the ones that are trying to develop their brand, their collection base, and all of that. I think this is going to be a really thoughtful food for thought.
It's a pretty interesting time to be alive because, you know, when I got into the art world, I think Plein Air Magazine celebrating 10 years this time, but it was 3 years before. Fine Art Connoisseur is 14 years. When I got into the art world 20 plus years ago, of course, there was no internet. I had a hard time finding workshops. I had a hard time finding how to learn plein air painting. And I know you've been at it for a long time, but there are probably more great artists alive today than any time in history. What do you think?
I would say that's a very accurate statement.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's because of I'm not a big fan of technocracy, but I can tell you that it's because of that the social media, you know, Rebecca and I have talked about many times. We didn't have a web page, did we? We didn't have a web page. There wasn't social internet, anything. You know, we did it the old Pony Express way, baby. We got her done.
Well, you know, I think that brings up an interesting point. You know, I was last time I was on an airplane, which has been a while. I remember there was a girl sitting in front of me and she kept taking selfies of herself. And then, you know, she's probably posting them. And I think we kind of are living in a world where we're performing for everybody. And I think that has some positives and some negatives from the standpoint of an artist. A lot of artists are posting all the time and they're posting their work. But as I don't know about you, but I know about me, out of all the things that I do, there's only about 10% that are worth showing anything to anybody. And I think that everybody has a percentage. I don't
That's a
know
pretty
any
fair
artist.
percentage for all of us.
Yeah, I don't know any artist
10%.
alive who should show everything, because there are sometimes things that just don't turn out right. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are this. This is why I had stayed on Facebook. I've been off the last 9 months because I worked on a record. The Lord told me, you're done with your painting. I put it aside, got out the old 5-string, started writing, and produced 2 CDs. One for my buddy Mark Daly, which you know, from Cincinnati, not from Denver, or not from
And a great
Colorado.
painter.
Huh?
And a great painter.
Oh yeah. The other Mark Daly, the Denver 7, he's real big. But anyway, so I did this record, and I've been off it. But the last 3, maybe the last 3 years on Facebook, I had a commitment to my fans and to myself as being one who has a lot of mileage and a lot of input on my own life with my art. I wanted to share that on Facebook. I always used it as a teaching forum. I told them what I was going to try to accomplish and what my accomplishments were and what my goals were in all of those paintings. And it was like doing a blog. You read it, takes you 4 or 5, takes you 2 minutes to read it. I didn't go real extensive, but just the pertinent information I wanted to know, and then they could look at the painting. So that was my participation in Facebook, because I really had, to be honest with you, I did have a problem with it, that I found myself wanting to look and see what the comments were. And, when you start getting the number of comments that I was able to queue, it can take it in the wrong way. And that was another problem for me with Facebook, pride.
Right. Yeah, I think that's right.
And it's dangerous, my friends. It's dangerous. Pride.
Yeah, I think that's right. Our egos tend to get in our way. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, you and I were talking the other day that I think one of the hardest things to do is to let go of yourself. I think especially when we're younger, we want to make it all about me. And the hard thing to do is to not make it about you at all, and to make it about everybody else, and to make it about God. So I think that's been a difficult one for me.
Yeah, well, we're taught, like you said, at a young age, you're responsible, which is true. But then your soul, your mind, and your emotions and your will, the self, runs with that, and it builds up a monumental a thing for you to overcome when you understand the Christian walk and the Christian life. I'm not into religion. Religion does nothing for man, but a personal relationship with Christ is a totally different thing. And when he says, pick up your cross, deny yourself and pick up your cross and follow me, that's an indication. And it's taken me many years. I just turned 75. Well, not just turned, last November. But it's taken me a lifetime to understand that the real value, the real worth of getting the heck out of the way. Our mind, because it's such a computer with information, wants to bring up information and knowledge and this and that. The thing I'm trying to realize, it's more important to run with wisdom. Wisdom always trumps knowledge, because knowledge is man's way of dealing with the universe. Wisdom is God's way.
Isn't there such a thing, though, as a healthy ego? I mean, it can't a healthy ego contribute, or is that something you think there's?
Well, I think it's dangerous. I actually think it's dangerous because, once when you put into that ego accomplishments and this and that, then pretty soon, it can be. God did give us one, but as long as I understand it's all about him and not about me, we got a good thing going.
I think that healthy ego tends to drive certain things to get done. I mean, there are people out there who manage to accomplish great things that helps mankind because they're really driven to get these things done. So I would think, you know, there's a little bit of healthy ego in that.
I would agree with you. That's true, but it has to be checked all the time. I'm telling you.
I had an interesting experience. I went to Dave Ramsey, who's a radio talk show host. He does an entrepreneur meeting.
Yeah,
And Dave, I know Dave through the radio industry, and they invited me down to visit the meeting, and I went for 5 days. And you know, I kind of grew up in an environment, an entrepreneurial environment. You know, it's all about growth and all about success and everything. And Dave said something that really flipped the switch for me. He said, you know, because to me, it never really gelled. I never could really figure it out and understand why. And he said two things that really stuck out. He said, first off, if you don't have a why, you're going in an empty direction. You know, you've got to have a why. He said, you want to come up with something that you do that is going to be life-changing, going to change people's lives, change the world, do something that's going to be meaningful. Otherwise, you know, there's no purpose to do it. The other thing he said is approach everything with a spirit of gratitude rather than a gratitude and abundance. You know, be grateful, and everything you do, everybody who's a customer, give them more than they expect, and make everything about gratitude. So when I started doing that, when I flipped that switch, everything changed, and I became happier, and all of this happened, and I just feel so much better because I'm focusing on gratitude.
That's the spirit of reciprocity. That's great. You know, ask yourself the how, when, where, why, what. You know, that's always paramount.
So I'm going to ask you some questions. I've given you some questions to think about, and I'm going to read you some of those questions, and then we'll probably get some from the audience. After a lifetime of painting, how would you approach learning differently? What did you used to think was important, and what have you changed your mind about?
Well, actually, I like to start off with a premise, which I believe to be very, very true, and that is that I've had a God-given storybook life. I sat on my father's lap at 2 when I was able to recognize and watch him do doodles. And I would squeeze his big left arm. Boy, he had a big tattoo. He was in the service, and I used to play with his great big arm and then look down at these doodles and go, what the heck is that? So anyway, what does a young boy do? He emulates his father in a lot of ways, in all the positive ways, hopefully. And so I have a young history of the love and desire to draw. I did daily vacation Bible school posters at 7 years of age, and that was the first positive thing I ever got any reinforcement from anybody outside of my home, because I was a train wreck waiting to happen. You know, they didn't have Redland back when I was a little boy. And so you go from that. Now you go into my teenage years. I took all the art and all the art classes. I loved it. My dad had me enrolled in the famous artist school from Westport, Connecticut. Spent $628 of his hard-earned money so that I could get that. I went to college.
What year was that famous artist school that you went?
Well, this was 1964.
So in 1964, $650 or $700, probably the equivalent of that would be several $1,000s today.
Yeah, probably was, because back in '64 you could buy a brand new car for $1,100.
Right. So almost the price of
$1,200, whatever.
Yeah.
I know my dad, when he bought his first new Ford Fairlane, 1963. You know, I mean, back then you could get a home, for when I was a little baby boy. It's amazing the inflation and that has taken on in the world and our country. Go ahead.
Okay, so you were talking about Famous Artist School and your
Well,
experience there.
yeah, and then after that, I went to college. I had an undergraduate degree in art. I had a master's degree. I studied one of the greatest painters to ever teach at Art Center in Pasadena, Donald Putman. Uh, I had an illustration career for 25 or 30 years, which was very great teaching and from a financial disappointment standpoint to learning a lot about art and business, and then started the after that, then started the fine art career with my wonderful wife Rebecca, who encouraged me and spent some of her hard-earned money to launch this experiment on what we call impressionism.
Let me ask you a question about that. You said something about the importance of learning the art business. A lot of artists are opposed to that idea because they got into art because they wanted to create, they wanted to paint or draw, and so the idea of being in a job or being in a business is repulsive to some people. How do you help them overcome that and understand the importance
Well, I
of
think
owning
it's a
a
decision they
business?
have to make. If you want to get in for business, you gotta play the business game. The business game's been there for years. There's always to deal with that in a proper way, in a moral proper way. There is, and if you don't want it to be a business, then don't have the expectations, unrealistic expectations about what you want to get from this art experience. It should be, above all, it should be and has to be, for any sustain any time, it has to be a joy. How many people are going to stay with it if it's you know and that's why people like yourself are involved in education, and myself too, for all these years, because we can help these people along the path, and they can find out. That's one of the questions. Why do you do art? That's one of the questions I think that you gave me as a preliminary. So we can talk about that later. But anyway, yeah, it's all, you have to be realistic. You got to understand, what do you want to try to get out of it? And then it's really very simple. But if you're torn in between the two, then you're going to be dragged into, more struggles and trying to figure out what is the business side. Rebecca and I had, in all my workshops for all these last 25 years, we had all these workshops were on Thursday afternoon at the end of the week. We gave the students an option to say, we're going to talk about business because it's always on everybody's mind. And so if you, rather than painting at this particular time at the end of the week, you can sit down with us, and Rebecca and I will take you through and use our model, which worked for us, and we're nobody special. We can share that with you to give you glimpses on how do you turn it into a business and what expectations and all that. So, and I had to learn that. Rebecca and I learned that on the run. We didn't read any books on it.
Yeah, I can tell you a good book to read it in case you need any. I think that that's really a very important point, though, because you don't want to. We've romanticized this idea of the struggle. We look at what I think is probably a horrific life for Van Gogh. He was involved in a lot of things. He was addicted to a lot of things. He did beautiful paintings, but he struggled. And maybe his struggle is what resulted in the beauty in his paintings. But I think we've tended to romanticize that. I wrote a letter the other day about art and parents who are horrified when their kid says, I want to take up art as a living, because they
I've
hear
heard
that.
those, I've heard those all my painting career. Yeah, go ahead.
And yet you and I both know a lot of artists who live great lives, travel what they want, live what they want, have what they want. Some of them have a lot, some of them have what they need, but they've decided that they were going to make that slight sacrifice to jump on the business wagon, find a way that it works for them without compromising their integrity, and ultimately without that, you're ending up going in and out of part-time jobs. And, I know an artist who's very, very good, who is making his living as a FedEx or UPS driver, and is miserable, but he hasn't been able to focus the time and attention to work on his business. And I think if he would do that and figure out a way, he would eventually be able to leave that.
Yeah, these Eric, these are things any artist worth his salt has to go through this. There's no cookie cutter way to acquire this. It's if you you have to figure out in life and make time for the things that you feel are essentially needed, and then you have to be realistic about it. But I mean, gee whiz, I didn't even, in 1960, when I was in California, I didn't even own a car. I couldn't afford it. I did dog portraits so I could play volleyball and chase girls on the beach, and that, so anyway, you've got to figure it out. And it's really not, I don't think it's really that hard. You just got to be honest with yourself, and you have to ask yourself, those questions: how, when, what, why, and all of that. So
I call it developing muscles, or putting on hats. You don't have to sacrifice being an artist just because you develop muscles in accounting or bookkeeping or shipping or marketing or, running the business aspects. They're just muscles. You're just putting on different hats for brief periods of time, but you are fully an artist. And if you can kind of get beyond that thought process of, business is bad, because the media has demonized business people, and for good reason. There are a lot of bad ones out there, but there are also a lot of good ones out there.
Yeah.
So, all right. So next question is, what did you used to think was important that you've changed your mind about in terms of painting?
Honestly, really not much, because it was more about the journey of learning.
Yeah.
And so as you accumulate learning, as you accumulate that, I did write a couple notes about that. One of the things that I realized that I wanted to share with the audience is that there's no magic formula. There's no switch that you turn on. Something moves you. You think about it. It might be color. It might be light. It might be that, you like the subject that well. There are all these different things that, that you think about. But I've learned that there's not just one. I think the big epiphany that I learned that there's not just one way to paint. In fact, when I started doing my fine art for my illustration, there were critics here in Indianapolis that called themselves critics, and they go, well, when is CW Mundy going to land? They want to put me in a particular box. No, you look at all the great, not that I am, but you look at all the great artists, they're all over the map. The really, truly great ones, because you're like an investigator. You're investigating all the different ways that you can put paint down, and what you think about that. I mean, it is it's monumental, all the different things that you have to take into account. So,
well, I don't you think that when you stick to one particular thing, don't you get bored?
Well,
I mean,
I went down that rabbit hole, and I really made a huge mistake, because I was only thinking of, hello, self. I'm not wired that way, but guess what, Eric? There are a lot of other people that aren't wired the way that I am. I'm Lewis and Clark, reincarnated. And these other people are in love with what they paint and how they paint it, and they love their subject. They haven't changed for 20, 25 years. Maybe they've gotten a little better at it, I'm sure, because of effort. but that's just the way they're wired. They don't have the inquisitive mind of a little rogue child like me, you know, that needed Redland. Thank God they didn't have it when I was a little boy too.
Well, but I think if somebody is in, they found something that works for them and they're in it, I don't think there's anything wrong with pursuing that and continuing to pursue it.
Oh
But for
no,
me,
no, and that's my point. Yeah, but see, I used to label them as they haven't evolved like the CW Mundy. You know, it's a bunch of baloney. Everybody's different, and the sooner that I realize that, I have an unfortunate tendency to think that everybody thinks like I think. You know, and it's something that God is trying to debilitate and get out of the way, because I'm reminded daily that people don't think the way I do, and I shouldn't expect them to come from the same starting point, you know. And that's when I realized, shame on me for having the audacity to put these people down like, oh, they're lower subjects, because no, that's just the way they're wired. And thank God that they're still painting and creating. What is it to me? Like Christ said to his disciples, what are you worrying about this guy? You know, you need to be concerned about yourself, you know, but we're always wondering about the other people.
I liked your point about Ritalin too. You know, I think that we are suppressing a lot of greatness. I'm not being critical of people who have done it. I've had to do it with my son, but also, you know, there's that creativity, that energy that comes out from that, you know, from that high amount of energy there. And think about all the people who are on Prozac now. I mean, what would have happened if Van Gogh were on Prozac? Would have been more productive, less productive, more energetic,
No, he
less
was
energetic?
just on turpentine. He like
and absinthe.
Yeah. No, that's so true, Eric. You know, I just need to look in the mirror and turn the finger around and point it at me, boy. A close Christian friend of mine, he told me one morning, he said, I woke up and he said, man, I woke up and I found out I'm the problem. Forget about Satan. Could it be Satan? No, he said, forget about that. I'm the problem.
Yeah,
that's what I've been learning the last 5 years.
You know, you and I talked a couple of days ago, and I was on the phone with somebody, and I was describing a bad experience. No experience is bad, but a tough experience.
Yeah.
When I went to San Francisco to start this company, and it failed, and you know, I caught myself telling her a story, and afterwards I thought the story I was telling her was not the right story. The story was that it was me that was the problem, and it was something that you had helped me understand and pointed out to me. So no longer am I going to tell that bad story. I'll tell the story, but now that the story is that I screwed up, I made mistakes, and now I'm willing to buy them, and I think that that's huge.
Yeah, you know, your failures are your greatest teachers if you want to stick around and really make progress. I jump on my students all the time, you know, and in a cautious way, because a lot of them can be very frail. And they're frustrated, and you walk up to them and they scrape the whole painting. And I said, well, why'd you do that? And she goes, I just couldn't take it anymore. You know, it's terrible. It's ugly. And I said, did you ever ask yourself why it was circling the drain? Well, no. You know, I don't know if I know yet. I haven't finished your workshop or whatever. But that is a typical example of missing the whole point. You know, when we have failures, there's a reason it's a failure. You might want to check and see what caused that failure. And a lot of time, like you said, which I see, my biggest problem is myself, and it gets in the way all the time. And the older and wiser I get, the more I'm aware of it, and I'm grateful, because that's a God-given blessing.
Well, I was reading a passage yesterday, and it said, I sent you, I can't quote it exactly, but it said, I sent you flood and famine and locust and still didn't get your attention.
Yeah.
So
They wanted to store up the manna for the next day because they didn't have faith. And that was what he was trying to build out in that 40 years in the desert. You know,
right.
Hello.
Hello. So somebody here has a question that says, have you changed mediums to experiment and then found a new love?
Yeah, I'm going to do something didn't think I was going to do, but hold on, I'll be right back.
Oh, okay. He's going to do something. He'll be right back. So
This
today,
is
if you tuned in for the first time, there's a lot of you in today that might be new. Today is day number 300. We've been here ever since the beginning of quarantine. Okay, what are you going to do?
well. Your question was the question was, have you experimented in any other mediums? Was that what was the question?
Yeah, well, the question said, had you experimented, changed mediums to experiment and found a new love?
Yeah. Well, the answer is a capital YESS.
Wow. Hold it back a little bit.
Can
And
you
is
see
that
that?
acrylic?
Yeah, it's an acrylic abstract, and here's just another one. Wait a minute.
Hold it over.
And so I did in a week and a half. I did 48 little 12 by 12s, and the wonderful thing about it was I mean this is a long. I could get into a great long answer, but I had epiphany when I was in New York at the Sal Gundy Club, the Master Show that Tim
Tim
Newton
Newton.
puts on. And I was walking across the street with my niece, who's was an art conservator for the Brooklyn Museum. And when I walked across the street with her and Rebecca to go have lunch, I had this epiphany. And it was God telling me in my heart, throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I've always been on the other side, criticizing people for throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And what he was telling me was, this stuff. You've been doing it for, why don't you start back over? You talk about oh yeah, you're just like a child. You got, I just want to see what I can get away with, which is true. We said, well, let's really go there. So, i.e., these paintings were not about anything other than playing in paint. I'm not painting them. Let's see. Yeah, I can't do it. I'm not painting. Boy, it's
That's
so hard.
working. Just hold it there. That's fine.
Yeah. I'm not painting these paintings to be some sort of a fantastic abstract artist or anything. I'm painting because I'm bypassing the science, all the stuff that I've spent my whole lifetime in art, and I'm trying to bypass that and return as a child. I spent 29, was it 2018 or 2019 with the Children's Museum? I spent a whole year. I was their first, what do you call it, artist in resident. And so I got to work with children for an entire year. And that really brought me down to ground zero, saying, and some of the greatest things that they did were when they didn't, I don't know if they were paying attention to what I was trying to get them to do or not, but when you just looked at what they did, I just thought, wow, how brave, how unfiltered, how pure, how, it's man's knowledge and everything that wants to be the critic of what art should be and what art is. But I can tell you, when you can go to the original look and the way that children express themselves through art is some of the most passionate and beautiful things that you'll ever see.
Well, when you told me you were going to go do that, I hadn't really understood it, but so it really was an education for you.
Yeah. And to return to that, and I don't have, I wrote this quote. God gave me this quote. Expectations put a stronghold on the Holy Spirit. So so I understand that. So I didn't want to go with the knowledge. I had pure color. I got the brightest colors you can get, from the store on purpose. And I just wanted to mess and play with it and not try to design it, and then I was given instructions as I continued on in that journey, which I still have more things that I feel that God wants me to try and experiment. So So that's that. That's a long answer to that person's question.
CW, when you're thinking about a painting, whether it's an abstract painting or whether it's a non-abstract painting, I guess all have their forms of abstraction. What is it you think about when you're composing that piece?
Well, again, it's like that same thing. I want to be very clear about this. There's never a switch you turn on and come up with a formula. The formula is the death of every painter. And I've been so blessed to understand, man, I come from, it might be something I heard on TV the night before that will be the influence, something that sticks in your mind, so there are different things that will give me ideas and things to think about. There are only two really different designs. There's a centrality of focus with a primary, secondary, tertiary, which all great representational painting is based on. And then thanks for Kwang Ho pointing out to me the equalization theory that the modernists came in. They didn't want a landing point. That was their purpose. They wanted you to roam all over. So I teach this so that the students can know that both are legitimate, but you need to know the reasons why you're doing it. If you want to have a great representational painting based on the science and based on what you see and based what is called some of the greatest paintings that man has ever created, it's a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. It's really very elementary, but most people don't do that. So they throw everything but the kitchen sink in the painting, hoping they get something right.
Can you explain what that means? I mean, you're going to confuse a lot of people who don't understand what the primary, secondary, and tertiary means.
Well, one of the teaching things that I've done, in fact, I do want to do a book on it, The Authorship of Painting, and that is the 7 foundational truths that I felt that I was given to the Lord, and I was able to find that in research and art history. There are 7 of them that I go with: squinting, drawing, design, value, color, edges, and paint manipulation. And then variety and unity in each one of those disciplines, because it's crucial. If you got too much variety, the painting, that discipline is chaotic. If you've got too much unity in that discipline, it's boring. So the key is to get as much variety in each discipline as you can get away with and still have it unified.
So when you taught at the plein air convention, which was kind of your last big formal workshop, you talked about what I call a tic-tac-toe grid, is dividing the canvas into thirds one direction and thirds in the other direction, and picking those points where the tic-tac-toes cross as focal points. Do you still
that's Fibonacci's science on he did it with language. He did it with my wife Rebecca does on our slideshow that we do when we talk about that. Take it, for example, a hurricane. When you look at that from outer space, it's got the Fibonacci curve. It starts out, it swirls down into the one point. The same thing with certain worms. The same thing with the Greek actually took that. It's called the golden section. So once in learning that, when I learned that in college, I said, well, this makes sense. If it will work up in that upper right quadrant, the golden section, well, it should work equally on the left side or on the bottom side, right and left. So then that's why I did the tit-tat-toe board, to show you that these were starting points, that you could, boy, I can't do this. Ali said this was going to be hard to do. I'm not going to do my fingers, my brain, but the centrality focus is just basically, a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. One, the primary is the main reason you're doing the painting. What's the painting about? What are you trying to tell the audience? What's the reason for it? You wanted to paint it. Why? What is it? Is it the apples, the color of the apples, or is it the base behind it, or the brass pot? What is it? And then that you do that with as much detail and color and texture and contrast and everything that you can, and then the secondary will support that, but it'll be
Can you
painted.
demonstrate that on the painting behind you? Can you go over and point to that painting and tell us what's going on there?
Well, yeah, we could.
I mean, just point to it, I think, because it pretty much does it.
Okay, well, okay.
Don't look at the screen.
Yeah,
look at the, yeah.
What was the obvious primary in that painting? Hello? It's got to be the ship.
Right.
It's the most detailed with a light background making it stand out. Now, the secondary is what's going on with the cloud, because it's so powerful and so graphic and almost to the point of being maybe even scary. And then the tertiary is going to be the cloud stuff behind, and part of the tertiary, a combination of going from the primary, the ship, secondary, the cloud. In between the secondary and tertiary would be this water mass with the waves rolling over. The tertiary areas are the flat areas of the sky.
Yeah, that's a great demonstration.
In a realistic painting. That's, not usually what I do a lot, but I wanted to do that because I made all that up. That ship was not on that water. That water was all put together with a bunch of different other photographs that I cut together and pasted and rephotographed. The sky was something I got and blew up with all the equipment that you have on your 11 Pro Max that you can distort and do all that. I got all these techniques. Boy, I tell you, we're going to talk about that, but Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or Rembrandt, we know Hans Holbein did. We'll get into that with Tim's Vermeer, but those guys would definitely have used these things to advantage because it takes them in a world that they've never seen. This painting back here was never seen until it was finished. That is not real. It's like what Carolyn Anderson says, my great mentor and teacher. It's all an illusion.
Well, and so there is this. There are folks, and again, I don't look at this as a right or wrong. It's just a discussion. But there are folks out there who are vehement about not using photographs. There are a lot of discussions about that. You need to learn to draw from life. You need to understand those principles. And that makes sense to me. And then there are those who say, no, you never use photographs. And my argument was, well, what if I'm driving down the road and I see a cow and I taking pictures with my iPhone while I'm driving at 60 miles an hour? No, you can't use that cow. You got to remember that cow. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, there's an old saying I won't mention, but I'll just say it this way. Everybody has opinions. I'm not going there, but everybody has opinions, and that's fine. That's what makes the world go around.
Yeah.
I go to higher calling when the knowledge is at stake. I always go and pray about everything and ask the Lord. And I would say that everything you said is actually valid and true. And most of all, I would preface it with it. You can only paint as well as you can draw. And if you're going to be one that's always going to turn the projector on to trace your image and paint, you're going to rob yourself of one of the greatest tools and experiences of how to learn how to paint. You have to learn how to draw first. And they're totally different, but yet there are, I think in some ways, and people like Sherry McGraw, who's one of my great drawing teacher, thought that girl is on it and she understands it. She was a great epiphany to me. And I took her, when did I take that class? About 7 years ago, about seven years ago. I always go to the people that I know. They know stuff I don't know, and I'm smart enough to go get it. I want to see for myself. Yeah. And that's the key thing. Your ego's out of the way. People would say, well, why are you going to go see her? And I go, she knows a lot more. I can sense and see. Her drawings are some of the most beautiful pieces. And David's got a lot of that stuff going too. Her drawings are some of the most beautiful pieces of art that have been created. And I'm going all the way back to all the big boys.
Well, absolutely. And I took a workshop from Sherry and David right before coronavirus, whenever that was. And it was so eye-opening and so fabulous. And it's had a very big impact. You know, when she looked at my paintings, she said, "I can instantly see what's wrong with them." And I said, "What's wrong with them?"
How to draw.
Well, that's a big part of it. But the other one was, you know, they don't have any air. And I said, "What do you mean they don't have any air?" And she said, "I can't explain it to you. I just have to show you. Come to the workshop." And it was fabulous. It really made a huge difference.
Yeah, Kwong had said that several times. I traded him a painting, and he wanted this painting because he said, "I can feel the air moving around the way you've painted air." And a lot of that has to do with my wonderful and great and most knowledgeable friend, Carolyn Anderson. You know, Rebecca laughs because we told Carolyn this morning we were going to do this. And Carolyn wrote on there, yeah, CW, when he wants to have he has the questions answered, he calls up Carolyn, and which is true. And she has taught me an immense amount of intellectual stuff that is so pertinent in creativity. And one of the great things that she taught me were doors and windows. And those are ways that you can break through form, from one form to the background of the form or whatever, and put these little breakthroughs through there. And they're actually windows and doorways so that your eye can move around and in and through the painting. But no, we paint the base, and then we got, you know, an outline. It's all outlined all around. It's a solid thing. There's no way, you know. And that works okay in our mind when we're looking at stuff. But when you're doing art, you want the best thing that you can do is have them move around. And that's one of the key things with doorways and windows. She's absolutely brilliant. And then another artist, Dan Gerhardt's, I was in love when I left illustration. I was in love with Gerhardt's, Clyde Aspavig, and Scott Christensen. And why? Because those guys knew stuff that I didn't know, and I was smart enough to know, because I could tell those things were, now this is getting back to Painted from Life. And so I went and studied with those guys. But one of the great things that Dan taught me that was just, I've used it and I teach it. I always give these other artists credit because it's not my epiphany, it's theirs. But he told me, he told the class, he said, you look at what's your darkest dark in your subject. Identify that. Is it a 7? Is it an 8? Is it a 9? And what's your lightest light? Is it a 1? Or is it a 2? Or is it a 3? What is it? Figure out what it is and put that passage down on your canvas. And guess what that means? All the other values are in between those two. And
right, they're like
brilliant,
gates.
because how many times, and you'll be a testimony to that. How many times have you done a painting where you go, well, gee, I didn't get it dark enough here. You know, I screwed that up. Or, gee, you know, this wasn't light enough. And it's because you didn't look at the relationship there of what's in front of you and establish that and put those marks down. Because, see, I tell the students in the workshop, I don't care how small the mark is or how large, put that down and remind yourself you got to go in between those. And it's amazing how much it helps.
The one thing I've noticed is that the artists that I respect the most are the ones that nail their values the best.
Oh, yeah.
You know, to that point, what Gerhardt's is talking about is so clear. You look at Dan Sprick's landscape paintings.
Oh, my gosh.
Not necessarily known for his landscape paintings, but he's one of the best landscape painters alive. And
his interiors too.
He nails his values so perfectly. And his perspective, he has on the video, we just did a video that we're releasing soon, a landscape video. And he constructed this big device that goes way beyond his easel just so he could figure out the perspective, because he wanted to get it spot on. I mean, and it is spectacular.
Daniel Sprick, he is an absolute amazing painter. He's brilliant. But Matt Smith was the dude that got me to understand the nailing the values. I sat next to him at the first inaugural thing down in Laguna Beach. They had invited 50, known painters to come down, and I got to paint with him. And he just blew my mind because he was so good at that. And you can train yourself. The people out there, look, you make a little strip of the 9 value scale. Don't go with the 10. 10 is a loser because you don't see what the halftone is. You got to go with a 9. So you have 5 is the halftone, and then you've got 4 values on one side and 4 on the other. But you can take that strip and you can be, your wife's driving or your husband's driving, and you can go and look at that drop shadow of that tree and go, what value is it? And then you guess at it, and you can train. You literally can, like Sherry talks about drawing, not measuring, and train your brain to see. You can do the same thing with values. You can train your brain, but you have to exercise it. It has to be told this stuff. It's not going to come by, you have to, a guy becomes a surgeon, a doctor. Why? Because he studies all the science and he does his work. And it's the same thing. Your brain is not going to do a very good job of pulling value if you don't practice it.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, we're running out of time. Do you want to keep going or do you want to shut it down?
Oh, I'm fine, man. We haven't even look, it's your program. I'm not going anywhere.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll keep it going for a while since it's day 300. If I'll just tell everybody some of the platforms you're watching this on, because we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and multiple Facebook pages, YouTube, etc. Some of them may shut us down at the 1 hour point. If you want to hang with us, thank you guys for hanging in there. I know a lot of you have things to do, but what living artists? Well, you talked about that one. Let's see.
Well, there were others that I didn't mention, T. Allen Lawson and Bill Anton. And one of the great things that I gleaned from those two guys, who are monumental in my estimation of what's being created today, is this concept of rest action. And as an impressionist, that was a key thing for me to learn and understand. I was under the stupid thinking that Monet was nothing but broken color, and that was it. But if you look at the bridge at Argenteuil, you can see the mass and the flat shapes of the sky and the clouds and other things working with that. So the point is rest and action. It's a recipe for absolute beauty and simplicity. Your action is where you want the centrality of focus, and that can incorporate a lot of different things that mean action. Heavier paint, brighter colors, heavy palette knife where everything else is brushed. There's all these different things that would go with that. And then, excuse me, now my mind is going blank here.
You've been drinking too much turpentine.
Yeah, no, I haven't been drinking enough. Look at my eyes. I coughed and they've turned fuse. I can't get back to that thought where I was going with it, but it was a very good and important thought. What was your comment?
Well, I was asking about, what you'd learned from other artists. You were talking about Bill Anton and T. Allen Lawson.
T. Allen Lawson, I was talking about that, rest and action. And then the rest are your big, large, flat shapes that could be a slight value shift in that flat shape, or a slight color shift, or a combination of both. But nevertheless, it's very laid back because it's supposed to be rest. If you think about that in terms of music, it's the same thing. For a great guitar player, either in rock or whatever it is, to take a break when it's his break, if he just dribbles off a ton of notes at the same speed, and there's no stop, there's no rest, there's no stall, you got a problem, and it'll go past you and nobody will hear anything. But what's really great about a saxophone player is the natural rest comes when they run out of air. And I had to have a great jazz player explain that to me, because I always wondered, how do they know when to take that break, man? It just blows my mind. It's perfect. Well, it's just because they only have so much breath.
I knew the great Paul Harvey when I was involved in the radio business on a higher level. I'm still involved, and he would talk like this. This is Paul Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
Good day. And it really made you sit up and take attention. So in the painting behind you, the rest would be the sky and the water.
Yeah, at different levels. The sky, although the sky does have form in it, but it doesn't have the knick-knack, paddywhack form that's in the cloud, and it definitely doesn't compete with the value and the structure of the ship.
Almost any time I have a problem with a painting and I can't figure out what's going wrong with it, and I'll text a picture of it to a buddy, and they'll almost always say, "Big shapes, baby, big shapes." Because when the big shapes aren't there and there's all this clutter, it just screws everything up.
I call it white noise.
White noise.
Yeah, that's what it is. We got to eliminate as much white noise as you can in your painting and break it down to look, simplicity rules. Hello. It's with your business and everything. The concept is universal.
Some people try to tie in all their darks. They try to make sure that somehow all their darks are touching. Do you try to do that?
Well, I think there's two different ways of looking at it. The connections of the lights and darks, they don't have to be connected, but they're connected in value. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
You have a certain number of 3 values in different shapes, and they get connected. They don't actually have to be physically connected, but there's that way. And then there's the other way of actually connecting shapes and values, and you can use that to lead the eye. And that's the reason for that kind of connection. But
I'm thinking you need to do this book.
Yeah, if I could just find a publisher.
Yeah, I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody.
They make some nice articles in your magazine. Hello, is anybody home? No,
we could do that. We could do it as a series in Plein Air magazine and then turn it into a book. But nobody would buy it if they had all the magazines.
Yeah, well, a condensed version is. I have my wonderful buddy Mark Daly that I play music, and I've worked on his CD, and he played all of his great guitar, work, and mandolin on my CD, and he's doing a book. He's working on a book. I guess I better not talk about it, but it's art related, and it's going to be revolutionary because he's going to talk about a lot of things that I've been privy to that I haven't expressed, and a lot of things that he's come up with, because he's he and his wife are Menzas. They're real smart people.
He's a brilliant
unlike
guy.
Me.
Brilliant guy. Well, you introduced me to Mark, and Mark came up with you to the Adirondacks, and we all played music together and got to know each other. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, I can still remember that, sitting in that thing and doing what was that song that I can't remember, but we played it and we were laughing and rolling, and people were making up verses, and it just went on, and it became a giant of its own. And Gary, the guitar player, what's his last name? Yeah, Gary Bertram
Oh
was the
yeah.
guy who gave us the chord progression, and then he started making up words, and those were some fun times, my friend. That's when you were first learning to play the guitar, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's coming back this year for the 10-year reunion.
Oh, he
in June.
is?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Oh, a man of the Lord. He is. That was one of the big blessings to get to meet him, and I had no idea. Here again, you're thinking about you and what can I do, and and I got to play this music, and how's it going to sound and everything. And I run into this guy for the first time, and then then we have this relationship, and then I find out what he's really all about and what that guy's accomplished an incredible amount of stuff with music. And
Yeah.
here
And
he
I
was
think
just
he's
happy
on the
to be
road.
sitting there playing rhythm guitar and singing,
Yeah. Well, it's fun for me to try to keep up. It's not easy. Let's see if we have any questions from the audience. See if there's anybody in there. I have a couple others here. Let's see here. What are the 3 lessons each of us needs to ask ourselves about a life well lived as an artist?
Well, I have I looked over that and you have those
Hey, Mark is in the comment. Hi, Mark.
At my age, 75 years, I can ask these questions now. Who are you painting it for? And I've learned a long time ago, I create everything because God creates. That I had a guy ask me on Facebook, you got this career, why you keep painting? What are you doing? And I go, well, God creates, and that's why I create. And I got an answer. He said, thanks. And that was it, which is fine. Do you paint what you're led to paint? That is the key thing. Don't get on the Ferris wheel with the Garrett's. Well, I sold those red begonias or whatever they are, and I got 4 other people want them. Can you get at your easel? All of that stuff. You got to paint what you're led to paint, and one of the big things that I've learned that really helped me out a lot was don't paint for man's approval, or paint for your peers' approval, or I actually don't even paint for an art audience. Just be yourself, and the market will find you.
Go ahead.
Well, one other thing I wanted to say is because I think it's funny because it gets back to Carolyn, because Carolyn laughs at me because she knows I'm ultra conservative on many fronts, but when it comes to art, I'm one of the most liberal artists that you would meet. And I tell my students, you need to go out as far as you can out on the limb on the right and on the left, as long as it's moral, in my estimation. And you never know where you're going to land, but you never know what those territories are until you're willing to step out in the unknown. Faith is the evidence of the unseen, not the seen. So I think that's an important thing.
Okay, so the next question I have is, actually, you and I got into a discussion about the movie Tim's Vermeer.
Oh,
yeah. And the optics. Do you want to touch on that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, I'll do it just a tad, but maybe, you're the guy that could do much more. I studied Hockney's book on
Camera Obscura.
Secret Knowledge. I got that book. You can get that. I encourage every artist to get that book. It's about $28 on the internet. It's got most fabulous color images in there. But one of the things that's a selling point for the students out there to see is Hans Holbein's, one of his great paintings, has this thing in the foreground that's at an angle. It looks like almost it could be an umbrella laying on its side or leaning on his knee or whatever. But it's not that, and you can't figure out what the heck it is. Well, David Hockney took the art tools that you have on the computer and stretch that thing out, and it was a skull. And when you see that, then that is the living proof, and all the other living proof that he talks about from the early, which I didn't know, from the early mid 1300s. Lenses, the camera lucida, the camera obscura, and all that stuff, mirrors, were all used as and in different time periods, but starting as early as 1330. And when you think about that, the reason is very apparent why that is so important, because these guys that did portraiture were getting the portrait work from some of the, yeah, there you go. Yeah, if they look at that, yeah, that's good. Yeah, if you look at that thing, and I think that's, you turn your head and everything, and you look at, and I still don't know to this day, and I don't think Hockney talks about that, but why did Hans Holbein do that? He did that because he could, and it might be a secret message or a secret code or a historical code for the future or whatever. But nevertheless, these guys were forced to use these lenses. Why? Because of the ego of their patrons that had all the money, that wanted to commission them to do these fantastic paintings of themselves, wanted something that looked as close or exactly like they looked. They were more interested in that than actually the painting. They want a painting, but now
Right.
they can find these guys that can paint it this way. So these guys were all running to the lucida, the lenses. I mean, Ingres, Caravaggio, just to name a few. All of these guys were going in that direction, and then Impressionism came, and they threw the baby out with the bathwater, and they didn't need that criteria. They were selling stylized art to the wealthy people that was of their culture.
So their movie came out, Tim's Vermeer, which was about Tim, a business guy who was trying to figure out how Vermeer painted what he did. So he reconstructed the scene, built a studio, and created a camera obscura, and basically said he didn't need any talent. He could do it just by looking at it. T. Allen Lawson and I went down and visited that studio, that stage, met with him, looked through the camera obscura. I've got a video on it somewhere on Facebook. I'll have to find it. But the thing that I think was a really important point is, yeah, technically you could follow that process and you could do it, but Vermeer had incredible talent. Not just any.
Hello.
I mean, what Tim did was nice, but there was no comparison to what Vermeer did.
Vermeer.
Right.
Well, also too, during that impressionistic time, there's a book. It's called Naturalism. And it's got Jean-Baptiste Lepage, who was one of the big painters, one of the most famous painters of that particular movement. And if you read chapter 2, it's really amazing, because they go into this whole technical thing. And so what the guys were doing, they were taking a lantern and putting it behind a glass negative and projecting that on the canvas. Now, how cool is that? But most people don't know that, and they show all the examples of these guys doing that with their photographs to form compositions and stuff and put things together, just like they did back in the old days, much earlier. I mean, all the way back to the 1300, and Caravaggio with all those figures. There's those heads. It's so funny. They're all on the same level, but they're all different heights of the painting. That shows you that the head he did the camera obscura from was outside the window, sitting outside, and he was in his studio. But so nevertheless, even in the naturalist movement, they went back to that, and they would take those tracings and take them out in a glass like a glass top and glass sides so that they could get all of the natural light to paint it in how it would look in the natural light, whatever that scene would be. And so it's a very important historical. That's another book. I think it's called Beyond Impressionism, Naturalism, something like that. It's got a bunch of women sitting with habits on, white habits on, out in front of a church in the background. It's a very important book on naturalism.
Okay. Well, let's see here. Let's see if we have any audience questions, and then if we don't, we'll probably see if there's anything else you want to chat about. And so I'm just kind of looking in the comments right now.
Yeah, there was one thing that I wanted to get to when I was talking about relational.
Yeah, let's do it.
And so I hope that these are people that have stayed long with us to get the real pearl of this whole conversation, and an epiphany I believe that God has given me is everything in life is relational. Okay. The bee, nectar. Hello, there's a relationship. The tree, ground and water and sunlight. There's a relation there. There's a relationship. You can go on in the real world. Well, thus, why would you not suppose that there's the same thing in drawing and the same thing in painting? Everything is relational, but they're full and it's camouflaged from them because they're looking for something else. But in drawing, it's like if you, when you're going to do the face, you look at the line going across your eye, and where does the ear meet? You know, when you do the middle of your nose and you go across, where is that in relationship to that part of the ear? You see what I mean? In form, and you go over here. The same thing with the corner of the crack of the mouth. Where does that fit in relate? Now I'm moving my finger, but if you had a real thin line, you could do that. And it helps you. So drawing is all about relationships. Guess what? It's the same thing with painting on all the different levels. Relationships of shapes. Why would you have a whole bunch of organic shapes on a square? The only reason you would, because you want the square to be the big boy, the centrality of focus, because it's not in relation to everything else. So, but it's the thing, people have said, oh, color, oh, it's such a hassle, it's such a problem. No, it's elementary. I can teach color to a child, but they haven't learned that. And color is basically, there's three things. The first thing is color is about the lack or the amount of chroma in any particular pigment. It's either bright and strong or it's not bright and strong. That has to do with color. That's not about value. That's about color, the intensity or lack thereof. The other key thing that's super, super important is the color is all about relationships. Why in the world, through the history of art, do we have a color wheel? And what does that tell us? The exact opposite of that color. Red, green is the opposite. Orange, blue is the complement. Yellow, purple is the complement. Why in the world would you not play the complementary card in color in your paintings? John Cook did a painting that blew my mind after I had already learned this and studied it. He showed me in a painting with a tractor out in the foreground. He used yellow and violet, red and green, and blue and orange in different particular areas, and then unified the painting with all of them. Those three triads. So color is very simple. Why would you paint a green background with a purple base and oranges? Logically, it's not going to work up unless you change and alter the color that you're going to work with so that it can work. You would do a red apples, do a green base, and if the base is green, do the wall a dirty gray red, and the tabletop, if the apples are red, then you do a dirty gray green. It's as simple as falling off a log. So the key thing that I think in this whole conversation for me from an art teaching point, because I know that Eric was one of the main drives, and I appreciate that your heart is for that, is that the relational aspects of everything in your subject matter and in your painting, everything needs to be relational. The more that you make it more relational, the more successful your painting can be, unless you're trying to do the opposite and create chaos. You know, the famous modernist Matisse. You know, he was during that period of Fauvism. And you know what's amazing? Fauvism had only about a 2-year run in the art history, in the art world. You know why? Because the color was absolutely atrocious. It was so bad and rogue on purpose, because they didn't want to do the complementary thing. They were doing the total opposite. The color was so bad and everything was so horrible, nobody wanted to look at it. It had a 2-year run. That, in my estimation, were probably, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, were some of his worst paintings, in my estimation, the most unsuccessful. But they were successful for him because he was doing that on purpose as research. You see what I mean? I've lost your vocal.
Okay, how about that?
Yeah.
All right. So CW, this has been fabulous. Thank you so much for this today. I'm going to have to roll. My son is in surgery this morning. He's been in surgery for 3 hours. As you know, he had a heart attack a year ago tomorrow, and died and was revived several times. And so he's in surgery again today, and I'm getting phone calls.
And you have our prayers, and I appreciate.
Thank you.
And Eric, thank you for this opportunity. This
Thank
was
you,
a blessing
CW.
for Rebecca and me. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everybody will share this and give your applause to CW Mundy. And thank you for sharing day 300. It's very special, CW. You've been a great friend, and God bless you. And thank you for all you and Rebecca do.
God bless you, brother. And God bless your son.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye. Okay. So this is day 300 coming to an end. Have a terrific day. Remember to keep yourself upbeat and positive. You know, we all have tough stuff going on around us, but we got to stay upbeat and